It was in the autumn of '95 that a combination of events, both trivial and momentous, led to my re-establishing my old quarters in Baker Street. A period of marital bliss had been tragically cut short by the untimely passing of my dear wife, and in the profound solitude that followed, my thoughts turned, as they often did in times of distress, to the one fixed point in my changing world: Sherlock Holmes. I found him much as I had left him, wreathed in the acrid smoke of his shag tobacco, his long, thin frame hunched over a bubbling retort in the corner of our old sitting-room. A litter of chemical apparatus, black-letter quartos, and the disjecta membra of a dozen unfinished investigations lay scattered about him. He greeted me with a warmth that, for all his customary reticence, I knew to be sincere, and within the hour my old life had reclaimed me. For some weeks, however, the fog that lay thick over the London streets seemed to have seeped into the very marrow of the criminal world. The papers were filled with nothing more stimulating than the squabbles of parish councils and the dreary prognostications of the financial markets. Holmes, denied the intellectual stimulation upon which he thrived, had sunk into one of his black moods, alternating between mournful airs on his violin and long periods of profound and unnerving silence. "Watson, I am undone," he declared one morning, flinging down the Daily Telegraph with a gesture of disgust. "There are no great criminals left. The world has grown commonplace. What is the use of my particular talents in a world that has no room for them?" "Come, Holmes," I said, attempting to rally his spirits. "Surely there is some small problem upon which you might exercise your faculties. The case of the Camberwell poisoner, for instance? A bungler, my dear Watson, a mere bungler. A man who uses arsenic in this day and age might as well sign his own death warrant. No, the grand old school of crime is on its wane. The days of Moriarty are over." It was at that precise moment that the brisk tramp of feet on the stair announced the arrival of a visitor. A moment later, our page, Billy, threw open the door to admit a man of such imposing stature and agitated mien that he seemed to fill the room with his presence. He was a man in the prime of life, with a florid complexion, a bristling moustache, and the clear, authoritative eye of one accustomed to command. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" he inquired, his voice a deep baritone that rumbled like distant thunder. My friend bowed, a flicker of interest in his languid eyes. "I am he, and you, I perceive, are Sir Reginald Carmichael, the ironmaster of Sheffield." Our visitor started back in astonishment. "Good heavens, how could you possibly know that?" Holmes smiled his thin, enigmatic smile. "The chalk between your forefinger and thumb, my dear sir, is of a particular quality found only in the boardrooms of the great northern industrial concerns. The faint but unmistakable odour of molten steel that clings to your tweed jacket confirms your connection with that industry. As for your identity, your photograph has appeared in the society papers no less than 3 times in the last month in connection with your new Bessemer process. Pray be seated, Sir Reginald, and tell me what brings you to Baker Street." Our client sank into the armchair that I had pushed forward, his face a mask of bewilderment. "I have heard of your methods, Mr. Holmes, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. I have come to you on a matter of the most profound and delicate nature. Last night I was the victim of a most audacious robbery." "A robbery?" said Holmes, his interest now fully piqued. "And what was taken?" "The Star of Lahore," replied Sir Reginald, his voice sinking to a whisper. "A diamond of immense size and purity, a family heirloom that has been in my wife's family for generations." "And the circumstances?" That is the most damnable part of it, Mr. Holmes. The diamond was kept in a new Chubb safe in my study. The safe is of the most modern design, proof against drills, explosives, and all the common tricks of the trade. I am the only one who knows the combination. Last night, I was working late in my study. At around 11 o'clock, I locked the safe and retired to bed. This morning, when I went to open it, the diamond was gone. And there was no sign of forced entry? The lock had not been tampered with? None whatsoever. The safe was opened as if by a key and then locked again. The police are baffled. They suspect an inside job, but I trust my servants implicitly. That is why I have come to you, Mr. Holmes. I have heard that you are a man who can see what others overlook. Holmes had risen from his chair and was now pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his head sunk upon his chest. "The case is not without its points of interest," he remarked after a long silence. "I should be happy to look into the matter. I shall need to visit your house, of course, and I should be grateful if you would provide me with a list of all your household staff, together with any details you may have about their backgrounds." Sir Reginald readily agreed, and after he had departed, Holmes turned to me, his eyes shining with a light that I had not seen in them for weeks. "Watson, the game is afoot!" he cried. "At last, a case worthy of our attention, a locked room mystery, a priceless jewel, and a baffled police force. What more could a man ask for?" An hour later, we were in a hansom cab, rattling our way towards Sir Reginald's palatial residence in Belgravia. The house was a monument to Victorian prosperity, a vast edifice of red brick and Portland stone, with a small army of servants in attendance. Sir Reginald himself met us at the door and conducted us to the scene of the crime. The study was a large book-lined room, furnished with a heavy mahogany desk, leather armchairs, and a magnificent Turkey carpet. The safe, a formidable-looking object of black steel, stood in a corner of the room. Holmes examined it minutely, running his long, thin fingers over the polished surface of the door and peering at the combination lock through his pocket lens. "There are no scratches on the dial," he observed. "Whoever opened this safe knew the combination. That much is certain." He then turned his attention to the rest of the room, his eyes darting from one object to another, his keen, hawk-like features set in a mask of intense concentration. He scrutinized the carpet, the curtains, the ashes in the grate, and the heavy velvet drapes that covered the windows. "You say you were working late last night, Sir Reginald?" he said at last. "Did you hear anything unusual? A footstep in the corridor? A creak on the stairs?" "Nothing, Mr. Holmes. The house was as silent as the grave." "And the windows? Were they locked?" "Yes, both of them." Holmes crossed the room to the window and threw it open. He leaned out, his gaze fixed on the flower-bed below. "There are footprints here," he said, "but they are of little consequence. They belong to the gardener. But what is this?" He pointed to a small, almost imperceptible mark on the windowsill. It was a faint, dark smudge, as if something oily had been wiped there. "A trifle," he murmured, "but not without its significance." He produced a small glass phial from his pocket, and with the aid of a pair of tweezers, carefully scraped a sample of the smudge into it. For the next hour, Holmes continued his patient and methodical examination of the room. He seemed to have forgotten our presence, so absorbed was he in his work. He crawled on his hands and knees. He ran his fingers along the skirting boards. He tapped the walls and the floorboards. At last he rose to his feet, a look of satisfaction on his face. "I have seen all that I need to see," he announced. "I should now like to speak to your servants." We were shown into the morning room where the entire household staff had been assembled. One by one, Holmes questioned them, his manner by turns friendly and severe. He inquired about their duties, their hours, their financial circumstances. He was particularly interested in a young footman named Thomas, a sullen and resentful-looking youth who had been in Sir Reginald's employ for only a few months. When the interviews were concluded, Holmes took his leave of Sir Reginald, promising to report any progress he might make. "Well, Holmes," I said, as we settled ourselves in the hansom cab, "what do you make of it all?" "It is a most singular case, Watson, a most singular case. On the one hand, we have a crime that could only have been committed by someone who knew the combination of the safe. On the other hand, we have this." He held up the small glass phial containing the smudge from the windowsill. "What is it?" I asked. "It is, unless I am much mistaken, a special kind of grease used by steeplejacks and other men who work at great heights. It allows them to get a better grip on stone and metal." "Now, what, I ask you, was a man who uses such grease doing in Sir Reginald's study last night?" I confessed that I was unable to offer any solution to this conundrum. "Nor am I at present," said Holmes. "But I have a feeling, my dear Watson, that we are on the verge of a very deep and dangerous game indeed." Back in our Baker Street rooms, Holmes spent the rest of the day in a state of intense mental activity. He consulted his vast and encyclopedic collection of commonplace books. He sent off a flurry of telegrams, and he spent several hours in the laboratory analyzing the sample of grease he had collected. By the evening, he had sunk into a deep and thoughtful mood. He sat in his armchair, his violin across his knees, drawing long, melancholy notes from the instrument. "You are making progress, Holmes?" I inquired. "I have discovered that the grease is, as I suspected, a highly specialized compound. It is used by only one firm in London, a company that provides maintenance services for church spires and other tall structures. I have also learned that the footman, Thomas, was dismissed from his previous position for theft." "So it was an inside job after all?" "It is not so simple, my dear Watson. The footman may have provided the information, but he does not have the skills to open a Chubb safe without leaving a trace. No, there is a master craftsman at work here, a man of daring and ingenuity, and I believe I know who he is." "Who then?" "Tell me, Watson," he said, his voice low and serious. "Have you ever heard the name of Captain Brooks?" I searched my memory in vain. The name was unfamiliar to me. "Captain Brooks," Holmes continued, "is one of the most remarkable criminals in Europe. He is a man of good family and excellent education, who has chosen to devote his considerable talents to a life of crime. He is a master of disguise, a brilliant strategist, and a man of iron nerve. I have crossed swords with him once before in the affair of the Dutch steamship Friesland. I succeeded in recovering the stolen bullion, but Brooks himself escaped. I have not heard of him since, but I have no doubt that he is the moving spirit behind this affair. But what is his motive? The Star of Lahore is valuable, no doubt, but is it worth the risk for a man of his caliber? That, my dear Watson, is the question that we must answer. I have a theory, but I need more data. Tomorrow we shall pay a visit to the firm of steeplejacks who use this particular grease. And we shall also make some inquiries into the history of the Star of Lahore. The following day we set out on our quest. Our first port of call was a grimy and dilapidated office in a back street of Lambeth. The proprietor of the firm of steeplejacks, a bluff and hearty man with a weather-beaten face, received us with some surprise. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he said, "I've heard of you, of course. What can I do for you?" Holmes explained that we were making a confidential inquiry on behalf of a client. He produced a list of the firm's employees and asked the proprietor if any of them had recently left his service. The man scanned the list. "Why, yes," he said. "A young fellow named Jack Mason. A good worker, but a bit of a lad. Left us about a month ago. Said he was going to try his luck in America." "And do you have an address for him?" The proprietor shook his head. "No, I'm afraid not. He was a bit of a rolling stone, was Jack." Holmes thanked the man for his assistance, and we took our leave. "So, our steeplejack is Jack Mason," I said, as we walked back towards the river. "But where does that lead us?" "To the shipping offices, my dear Watson, to the shipping offices. We must discover if a man of that name has recently sailed for America." Our enquiries at the offices of the various transatlantic shipping lines proved fruitless. No one by the name of Jack Mason had booked a passage to America in the last month. "He may have used an alias, of course," said Holmes as we made our way back to Baker Street. "But I am beginning to think that our Mr. Mason has not left the country at all. In fact, I have a strong suspicion that he is still in London, and that he is a very close associate of our friend Captain Brooks." That evening we received a visit from a most unexpected quarter. A telegram arrived informing us that Inspector Lestrad of Scotland Yard would be calling on us at 9 o'clock. "Lestrad!" I exclaimed. "What can he want?" "He is no doubt still floundering in the depths of the Carmichael case," said Holmes with a chuckle. "He has come to the master for a crumb of comfort." Punctually at 9, the inspector arrived. He was a small, ferret-faced man with a brisk and energetic manner. "Well, Mr. Holmes," he said, rubbing his hands together, "I suppose you've heard about the Carmichael jewel robbery? A pretty little puzzle, eh?" "I have given it some thought," said Holmes non-committally. "And have you come up with anything?" "We're at a dead end, I don't mind telling you. No clues, no suspects, nothing." "I may have a small suggestion to offer," said Holmes. "I should be very much obliged if you would have a watch kept on all the pawnbrokers in the city, and I should also be grateful if you would circulate a description of this man." He handed Lestrade a slip of paper on which he had written a detailed description of the steeplejack, Jack Mason. "But who is he?" asked the inspector. "And what has he to do with the case?" "He is the man who stole the diamond," said Holmes. Lestrade stared at him in disbelief. "But the safe was not forced. It was opened with the combination." "Precisely. And that is why I have come to the conclusion that the Star of Lahore was not the real object of the crime." "Not the real object. Then what was?" "That, Inspector, is what we have yet to discover. But I have reason to believe that Sir Reginald Carmichael is in very great danger, and I would advise you to have a guard placed on his house without delay." Lestrade departed in a state of some bewilderment. "Holmes," I said when he had gone, "you are playing a very deep game. What is it that you suspect?" "I suspect, my dear Watson, that we are dealing with a man who is as clever as he is ruthless. Captain Brooks is not a common thief. He does not risk his life for a handful of diamonds. He is playing for much higher stakes, and I believe that the Star of Lahore is merely a pawn in his game." The next few days were a period of anxious waiting. A guard was placed on Sir Reginald's house, and a watch was kept on all the pawnbrokers in London. But there was no sign of either Jack Mason or the stolen diamond. Then, on the fourth day, there came a breakthrough. A telegram arrived from Lestrad. It read, "Man answering to description of Mason, arrested trying to pawn small diamond at shop in Aldgate. Diamond identified as one of a number of smaller stones that were set in the mounting of the Star of Lahore. Come at once." We hurried to Aldgate police station, where we found Lestrad in a state of high excitement. In a cell at the back of the station we were shown the prisoner. He was a young man of about 25, with a sullen and defiant expression on his face. He refused to give his name or to answer any questions. "He's a tough nut, is our Mr. Mason," said Lestrad, "but we'll crack him, never fear." Holmes studied the prisoner for a long time, his gaze intense and penetrating. "Tell me, my man," he said at last, "what has become of Captain Brooks?" The prisoner started, and a look of fear flickered in his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. "Oh, I think you do," said Holmes. "You are a steeplejack by trade, and you were hired by Captain Brooks to steal the Star of Lahore. But you were not told the real reason for the theft, were you? You were told that it was a simple jewel robbery. But you have been betrayed, my friend. Captain Brooks has taken the real prize and left you with a mere trinket to pawn. He has used you as a scapegoat, and he has left you to face the consequences." The prisoner's face had grown pale. He licked his dry lips. "It's a lie," he stammered. "I don't know any Captain Brooks." "Then perhaps you can explain this," said Holmes. He produced a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a receipt from a pawnbroker in Ratcliffe Highway for a loan of £10 on a silver watch. The date on the receipt was the day after the robbery. "The watch," said Holmes, "was identified by its owner, a certain Sir Reginald Carmichael, as one that he had left on his desk on the night of the robbery. It was taken along with the diamond. But you, my friend, were so foolish as to pawn it in your own name. The pawnbroker, a man of commendable honesty, contacted the police, and that is how we knew that you were still in London." The prisoner's bravado had completely deserted him. He slumped onto the bench in his cell and buried his face in his hands. "He told me he'd kill me if I ever talked," he sobbed. "He's a devil, is the captain." "He will not harm you now," said Holmes. "You are under the protection of the law. Now tell us everything. What was the real object of the crime?" The steeplejack, his resistance broken, confessed everything. He had been approached by a man who called himself Captain Brooks and offered a large sum of money to steal the Star of Lahore. Brooks had provided him with the combination of the safe and with a special tool for opening it without leaving any trace. "But what about the real prize?" asked Holmes. "What was it that Brooks was after?" The steeplejack shook his head. "I don't know. He never told me, but I saw him take something else from the safe, a small leather-bound book." "A book?" said Holmes, his eyes gleaming. "And what did it look like?" "It was old, and the leather was worn. It had a strange sign on the cover, a kind of a snake eating its own tail." Holmes sprang to his feet, his face alight with excitement. "The Ouroboros!" he cried. "Watson, we must go to Sir Reginald at once. There is not a moment to be lost." We left the police station and took a cab to Belgravia. We found Sir Reginald in his study, his face grey with anxiety. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "what is it? Have you found the diamond?" "The diamond is of no consequence," said Holmes. "Tell me, Sir Reginald, did you have in your safe a small leather-bound book with the sign of a serpent eating its own tail on the cover?" Sir Reginald started, and a look of utter astonishment came over his face. "Yes," he said, "it was my father's journal. But how could you possibly know of it?" "And what was in the journal?" "It contained the details of a secret process for hardening steel, a process that my father invented many years ago. It is a process that would be of immense value to any foreign power. That is why I kept it in the safe." "And that, Sir Reginald," said Holmes, "is why Captain Brooks stole it. The diamond was merely a blind to distract our attention from the real crime. Brooks is no common thief. He is a spy, and he is working for a foreign government. He intends to sell them your father's secret, and I have no doubt that he has already made his arrangements." "But what can we do?" cried Sir Reginald. "The secret is priceless. In the wrong hands it could be used to build weapons of a terrible power." "We must act, and act quickly," said Holmes. "Brooks will not leave the country by any of the regular channels. He will use a private boat, and I think I know where he will make his escape. The tide is on the turn, and he will want to be away from the coast before dawn. Watson, we must go to the Pool of London, and we must go now." Within the hour we were in a police launch, speeding down the Thames. The night was dark and moonless, and a cold wind whipped the spray into our faces. The great river was a forest of masts and funnels, a maze of dark and silent wharves. Holmes stood in the bows of the launch, his tall, gaunt figure silhouetted against the night sky. He scanned the shore with a pair of night glasses, his face set and grim. "There she is," he said at last, pointing to a small dark shape moored alongside a deserted wharf. "The Sea Serpent, a fast steam yacht registered in the name of a Mr. Smith. But I have no doubt that she belongs to our friend Captain Brooks." As we drew closer, we could see a light in the cabin of the yacht. A moment later, a figure appeared on deck. It was a tall man with a military bearing. "That is our man," whispered Holmes. "He is waiting for the tide." We brought the launch alongside the yacht, and Holmes and I, followed by a party of armed policemen, scrambled on board. The man on deck turned to face us, and in the light of the lantern that he was holding, I saw a face of extraordinary intelligence and cruelty. It was a face that, once seen, was not easily forgotten. "Captain Brooks," said Holmes, his voice cold and hard as steel, "I arrest you for the theft of the Carmichael journal and for espionage against the British Crown." Brooks smiled, a thin, contemptuous smile. "You are too late, Mr. Holmes," he said. "The journal is no longer in my possession. I have already passed it on to my employers." He raised a small silver whistle to his lips and blew a shrill, piercing blast. A moment later, a small, fast-moving boat shot out from the shadows of the wharf. It was a torpedo boat, and it was flying the flag of a foreign power. "You see, Mr. Holmes," said Brooks, "you have been outwitted. In a few minutes I shall be on board that boat and beyond your reach." But he had reckoned without the resourcefulness of Sherlock Holmes. With a sudden, swift movement, my friend snatched the lantern from Brooks's hand and hurled it into the open hatchway of the yacht's engine room. There was a dull explosion, and a sheet of flame shot up into the night sky. The yacht was on fire. The crew of the torpedo boat, seeing the flames, hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, our own men opened fire. The torpedo boat, caught in a withering crossfire, turned and fled. Brooks, his escape cut off, turned on Holmes, his face a mask of fury. He was a powerful man, and he fought like a tiger. But Holmes was his equal, For a few moments, the two men swayed back and forth on the deck of the burning yacht, locked in a deadly embrace. Then, with a sudden heave, Holmes threw his antagonist to the deck. A moment later, Brooks was in handcuffs, and the fire on the yacht was being brought under control. In the cabin, we found the stolen journal, hidden in a secret compartment. As we chivied our prisoner back up the Thames, Holmes turned to me, a look of quiet satisfaction on his face. "It was a close-run thing, my dear Watson," he said. "But all's well that ends well. We have recovered the secret, and we have brought a very dangerous man to justice." "It was a brilliant piece of deduction, Holmes," I said. "It was a simple matter of logic," he replied. "Once I had realized that the diamond was a blind, the rest was elementary. Brooks is a man who thinks on a grand scale. He would not risk his life for a mere jewel. He was after something much more valuable. And what could be more valuable than a secret that could change the balance of power in Europe?" Captain Brooks was tried in camera and sentenced to a long term of penal servitude. The full story of his crimes was never made public, for fear of causing a diplomatic incident. But in the annals of crime, the name of Captain Brooks will always be remembered as that of a man who, for a brief and brilliant moment, challenged the supremacy of Sherlock Holmes and lost. As for myself, I remained in my old quarters at Baker Street, and for many years to come I had the privilege of accompanying my friend on many more of his strange and wonderful adventures. But I do not think that any of them ever gave him more satisfaction than the one that has been recorded in these pages as the adventure of the Brooks case.